It was a quiet afternoon in a suburban park. Children played, families strolled, and everything seemed normal until a young woman appeared, clutching a small baby in her arms. She looked restless, her eyes darting around nervously as if she was being followed. She approached a man sitting on a bench, a complete stranger, and without hesitation, handed him her baby. Shocked, the man hesitated, but before he could ask any questions, the woman muttered, "Please take care of him for just a little while. I'll be back soon." Then, without waiting for his reply, she walked away quickly, disappearing into the crowd. The man was stunned. He didn't know her, had never seen her before, and yet, here he was holding someone else's baby. Minutes ticked by, and his confusion turned into anxiety. Why would a mother leave her child with a stranger? Was she in danger? Was this a trap? People around began to notice, whispering and staring. He tried to call after her, but she was gone. As the sun began to set, the mother had not returned. The man's hand shook as he held the crying baby tighter. Should he wait? Should he go to the police? Every scenario played in his head, but none made sense. This was not just a random act. It felt deliberate, as though she wanted her baby to be found by someone else. That one shocking moment would set off a chain of events that stunned not only the stranger, but the entire community. The truth behind why she left her baby was far darker than anyone could imagine. The man who had just been handed the baby sat frozen on the park bench. His name was Daniel, an ordinary office worker who had stopped for a short break after work. One moment, he had been scrolling through his phone, and the next, he found himself holding a baby wrapped in a soft blanket. His heart raced as he looked around in disbelief. Why me? He thought. At first, Daniel assumed it was some kind of misunderstanding, perhaps a mistake. Maybe the woman was nearby, talking to someone, and would return immediately. But as seconds turned into minutes, he realized she had vanished into thin air. His eyes scanned the park, parents pushing strollers, children laughing, joggers passing by, but not a single trace of the woman who had trusted him with her child. Daniel's hands trembled as the baby began to fuss, letting out soft cries that quickly grew louder. He had no experience with children. He was single, lived alone, and had never held a baby for more than a few seconds in his life. The weight of responsibility suddenly felt crushing. People around him started glancing suspiciously, as if questioning why a random man was clutching a crying infant. Embarrassed and panicked, Daniel stood up, tried to calm the baby, while searching desperately for the mother. What kind of person leaves their baby with a stranger? His mind spiraled with possibilities. Maybe she was in danger. Maybe she was testing him, or maybe she was just irresponsible. But deep down, something told him it was more than that. As the cries grew louder, Daniel knew he had to make a choice. Should he wait, trusting that she would come back? Or should he call the authorities before it was too late? What Daniel didn't realize was that his decision in that moment would change not only his life, but the baby's future forever. As Daniel stood in the park clutching the crying baby, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The mother wasn't coming back. What had seemed like a short errand or a temporary step away now stretched into a frightening mystery. 10 minutes became 20, and 20 turned into an hour. The young woman had completely vanished. Daniel walked across the park, retracing her steps, scanning every path, every bench, and every corner where she might have gone. But she was nowhere to be found. He asked a few passers-by if they had seen her, describing her nervous face, her trembling hands, and the hurried way she had walked away. Some shook their heads. Others said they remembered seeing her, but none had noticed where she had gone. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. The baby's cries grew louder, echoing through the park and attracting more stares. Whispers spread among strangers. Why does that man have a baby? Where is the child's mother? Daniel could feel judgment in their eyes, though he was as lost as they were. His chest tightened with anxiety. An unsettling thought crossed his mind. What if she never intended to come back? The way she had looked at him, the urgency in her voice, the way she didn't wait for an answer, it all suggested something more deliberate. This wasn't carelessness. This felt like a planned disappearance. As evening shadows stretched across the park, Daniel's fear turned into dread. He checked nearby restrooms, the parking lot, even the streets beyond the park. But every search ended the same way. Silence, emptiness, and no sign of the woman. Now he faced a terrifying truth. He was the only one left responsible for the baby. And as the sun set, one thing became clear. The mother had vanished without a trace, leaving behind questions that no one could answer. Outline 4. Growing suspicion, 335 words. By now, Daniel's heart was pounding with unease. It had been hours since the woman handed him the baby, and still, there was no sign of her return. What began as confusion was now transforming into suspicion. Something was terribly wrong. Daniel sat back on the park bench, rocking the baby gently, trying to stop the cries. He replayed the moment in his mind, her trembling hands, her whispered words, the fear in her eyes. Was she being chased? Was she hiding from someone? Or worse, had she abandoned her child on purpose? Every passing minute felt heavier. People who had noticed earlier were now avoiding him, perhaps assuming he was involved in something suspicious himself. Daniel could almost hear their silent judgments. Why is this man alone with a baby? His throat tightened. He knew he couldn't just sit there forever. He pulled out his phone and debated calling the police. But another thought stopped him. What if the woman returned and accused him of trying to steal her baby? That could ruin his life. He had no proof she had willingly left the child with him. His palms grew sweaty. Then a chilling possibility crossed his mind. What if this was some kind of setup? Maybe criminals were watching, waiting for him to panic, so they could use the baby as bait for something darker. His eyes darted around the park, scanning every shadow, every figure. Suddenly, everyone looked suspicious. The baby's innocent face pressed against his chest only made the weight heavier. Daniel realized this was no ordinary situation. It was a trap of mystery, and he was caught in the middle. At last, with the baby's cries echoing in his ears, Daniel made up his mind. He had to involve the authorities, because if he didn't act soon, both he and the baby could be in unimaginable danger. When Daniel finally called the police, relief washed over him, yet it was mixed with dread. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived, their flashing lights painting the park in red and blue. As Daniel explained what had happened, the officers exchanged tense glances. They took the baby gently from his arms, but their expressions suggested they already knew more than they were willing to say. At the station, Daniel repeated every detail. How the woman had appeared restless, how she handed him the child without explanation, and how she disappeared. The officers listened carefully, then pulled out a photograph. His heart skipped a beat. It was her, the same woman. But the next words froze his blood. She's been missing for weeks, the officer said quietly. And she's not just any mother. She's wanted in connection to a larger investigation. Daniel's mind reeled. The trembling hands, the haunted eyes, it all made sense now. She hadn't been running from him. She had been running from something or someone far bigger. The officers revealed fragments of the truth. She was entangled in a dangerous case involving criminal activity, and her sudden appearance in the park wasn't random at all. Leaving the baby with a stranger might have been her only desperate chance to keep the child safe. The baby, they explained, was at the center of it all. Protecting him was urgent. Daniel realized that what had felt like a terrifying burden might have been an act of trust. For reasons he couldn't yet understand, she had chosen him, an ordinary man sitting on a bench, to carry a piece of her secret. As the reality settled in, Daniel's shock turned to fear. He wasn't just part of a strange encounter anymore. He was now tied to a mystery far darker than he had imagined. And the truth was only beginning to surface. Outline 6. The baby's safety, 335 words. Inside the police station, the crying baby became the center of everyone's attention. Officers moved quickly, making calls, filling out urgent reports, and contacting Child Protective Services. To Daniel's surprise, the entire atmosphere shifted. This wasn't just a case of a lost child. It was far more serious. A female officer carefully took the baby, wrapping him in a fresh blanket, and whispered reassuring words as if to comfort both child and man. Daniel's heart ached as he watched. The innocence in the baby's eyes contrasted painfully with the chaos surrounding him. He couldn't shake the thought, what future awaited this child now? The police explained that immediate steps had to be taken. The baby's safety was the highest priority. First, they would place him in temporary protective custody. Then, depending on what they uncovered about the mother, social services would decide whether the child could ever be reunited with her, or if a new home had to be found. Daniel's stomach tightened to the thought. He barely knew the child, yet he already felt a strange bond, as though fate had chosen him to be there at that exact moment. The idea of handing the baby over completely broke something inside him. But reality was harsher than emotion. The baby needed stability, medical checks, and legal protection. A social worker arrived, gently taking notes and promising to ensure the child's well-being. She reassured Daniel, "You did the right thing by stepping forward." Still, questions lingered. Why had the mother vanished? Was she protecting her child from someone dangerous, or from herself? And if the mother was tied to a criminal investigation, what did that mean for the baby's future? As Daniel left the station, his eyes lingered on the infant one last time. The child was safe for now, but deep inside, Daniel knew this was only the beginning of a story far bigger and far darker than anyone had imagined. Days after the incident, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the baby. His mind replayed the moment the woman had rushed toward him, her desperate eyes, her trembling hands, and the haunting words, "Please take care of him." He needed closure. But when the police finally called him back, the truth they revealed was far more shocking than he had ever imagined. The young woman wasn't just a troubled mother on the run. She had been connected to a dangerous criminal network, one that the authorities had been trying to track for months. But here was the real twist. The baby wasn't simply her child. He was the key witness to her story. DNA tests revealed the child's father was one of the very men the police had been investigating. The mother had discovered the horrifying truth and, realizing she and her baby were in danger, had made the impossible choice: vanish and entrust her baby to a stranger who might give him a chance at survival. Daniel sat frozen as the detectives explained. Suddenly, every detail clicked into place. The fear in her eyes, her determination, the way she didn't hesitate to hand over the baby. She hadn't abandoned her child. She had saved him by disappearing. She gave the baby a chance to grow up away from the shadows of crime. For Daniel, the realization was overwhelming. A random afternoon in the park had thrust him into the middle of a life-or-death struggle he never asked for. Yet in that chaos, one truth stood out. Fate had chosen him to protect innocence, even for a brief moment. The twist didn't just shock Daniel. It stunned the entire community. Because sometimes the most unbelievable stories begin with a simple, unthinkable act: a mother leaving her baby with a stranger.